Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Mississippi Library Commission's webinar on program planning. Programs can be one of the most rewarding part of library work. When you've finished a successful program and you've had a lot of attendees, made a lot of people happy, it really just does your heart good. If you're lucky or you've got a lot of years experience behind you combined with some of that luck, you might be able to pull off a really great program by the seat of your pants. But that's probably not the best way to do it. So today we're going to cover some things that might help you in the planning process to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. So the first time I heard the phrase, well begun is half done, it was in a movie about a British nanny, but it's actually been traced all the way back to Aristotle. So it was probably even before then. So if it was very true in the 330s BC when Aristotle was around, and again the 1960s when that movie came out, and it still comes up as relevant today, then it's a good thing to keep in mind. Well begun is half done. If you have done your planning process and really sat and thought through how you're going to make your program work beforehand, you're a lot more likely to have a good outcome. But before you get started, you have a brilliant idea in your head and you just know it's going to be wonderful. Before you even start, it's a good idea to make sure you know your library's programming policy and approval procedures. Your library's policies are created to reflect their mission and their goals, and also probably take into account how they allow use of the physical spaces. And your approval procedures are put in place for a reason, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page and knows what's happening in all of the locations. The last thing you want to do is put a lot of time, effort, and heart into a program to find out it doesn't quite meet with what the library system's missions or goals are, or that you can't do it this year because you didn't put it in for approval soon enough. Maybe you can do it next year. That kind of makes you feel a little crestfallen. The best thing you can do is either, if your library system has one, use or create a planning form or a planning worksheet. It's very much like a grocery store list. When I go to the grocery store and I just know I need only 3 things, I'm not going to write them down. I go to the grocery store, I come out with 10 things. I forgot 2 of the things I originally went to go for. Now, there's another kind of shopper that will take the time to jot everything down on the list. They'll run in, they'll follow the list, they get everything that they need, but maybe the last thing on the list is the tomatoes. Well, the tomatoes are in the beginning of the store. So they start out at the front part of the store. They work their way around all through the list. They get to the bottom, and then they're like, oh, shoot, tomatoes. Now I have to go all the way back to the other side of the store. That's frustrating. And then there are people, sort of like my mom, she'll never see this, I promise, who will organize their lists by section of the store. So all of their produce is going to go at the front part of their list, and all of their dairy or their frozen items are going to go at the bottom of the list. And that follows the path that they usually take through the store. So think of a planning form or a planning worksheet, and I'm just going to say form for the rest of the webinar because it's shorter, as something like your grocery list. It just provides you a starting point for getting your program together. It helps you think things through in a logical way, systematic way, and that keeps you from missing any major elements or major parts of the program. It also kind of gives you a really big picture of all of the items that you're going to need for it and all of the actions that are going to have to be taken for the program. That really keeps you from scrambling at the last minute to find a few items here or there, or to get 2 or 3 little things done that you had forgotten about. They can also help prevent or help predict potential obstacles. Sometimes you don't think about all of the things that could go wrong until you're really sitting and focusing and thinking about all of the actions needed to make that program happen. And just as important as all the rest, a good program form is going to be very compelling documentation for getting your program approved and getting it funded. So, what goes on a planning form? Well, here we've got title and description, of course, justification and goals. Those are a little bit less fun to work on sometimes. You need a list of the organizers, the presenters, the helpers. And right about now, you're thinking, this is so basic. Of course, these things are going to go on it. But what also has to go on it are all of these things. Date, time, location, intended audience, estimated attendance. That's always a tricky one. Supplies and equipment. What's your budget? Where are you going to get the money from? When are you going to get things done? What order are you going to do them in? Any checklist. That's a lot of information to keep in your brain. Or if you're working in a program with more than one person or with a group, you want to make sure that you're all on the same page. Literally, you're all working from the same information and you all know the same basics. So you can't really do that if you don't have things written down. And while you share a lot of information through conversations or emails or messages, if you don't have one document you can go back to, one document that's the foundation for your program, you're a lot more likely to have problems with poor communication or things not getting done. So we're just going to talk about some of the more important things on planning forms and worksheets today. There is absolutely no way that we can cover every small detail that you're going to want to have on a form, because planning forms, just like programs, just like libraries, they're all different. One size doesn't fit all. Some programs may require more or less information. Like if you're having a really large special event that's pulling together lots of different community groups, that's going to be a lot different than maybe a program that you offer once a month on a regular basis continuously. So if you're working from a form that doesn't suit your needs, if it's your library systems forms, don't be afraid to ask to see if you can make changes or adapt a form that is going to work for the type of program that you're working on. If your library system doesn't have a form, that's okay. Go ahead and sit down and spend some time working one up. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be amazing. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It just has to be something that gives you a starting point for making sure that you're getting everything you need done for that program. Now, title and description. Again, you're thinking this is so basic. But let me tell you why I think it's so important to be covered here. Your title and your description are going to be the basis for the entire planning process. And it's also going to be the basis for getting that approval and getting that funding that you need. So if you have a good title and a great little description, you're a lot more likely to be able to convince your supervisor to approve and to get some buy-in from your community, not to mention attract some attendance. Your title needs to be really short and sweet and either really informative or catchy. And I do have a recommendation. If you've not played around with AI, ChatGPT is a wonderful tool for coming up with titles. I'm not good with the cutesy stuff. I'm not good with like the writing greeting cards, things like that. But thankfully, ChatGPT is, or you might have someone in your library system who's really good with that sort of thing. And it's very simple. You could pull up ChatGPT. I'm only saying that one because that's the one I've used, and put in title for library program about beetles and see what comes up. And if you don't like it, you say, I don't like that one. Give me another one. And you can keep doing that until you find something cute. Now, your description needs to be clear and concise. You don't have to tell them everything you're going to be covering or doing in that program, just a sentence or two. You don't want to be guilty of the TLDR. For people who aren't online very much, that means too long, didn't read, where someone would love to have read through a post that was made or an article, but it was just going to take too long, so they gave up. You don't want to do that. So here's an example with the beetles. The thought of attending a library program to learn about pine bark beetles doesn't sound very thrilling to the majority of the population. But if you have the title Tree Killers, Pine Bark Beetle Infestation, that's going to catch a lot more attention, both of your supervisor, your funders, and your patrons. And so rather than just saying, learn how to handle pine bark beetle infestation in your yard, which, it's okay. It's short and sweet and informative, but it doesn't really have a zing to it. You can say pine beetles killed more than 12.5 million trees in Mississippi in 2023. So you're giving them something that catches their attention, makes them say, whoa, 12.5 million just in my state. That's a lot. And then you're telling them, learn how to spot the signs and mitigate the damage. So that's a lot more catchy and a lot more likely to get positive response. And once you have that approval, and once you have some of that community buy-in, if you're able to get that, that's going to make the rest of the programming process a lot easier. Other important things are your justification and your goals. You want to be able to tell your funders, whether it's someone who's an alderman or a mayor or someone who's contributing money to your program, you want to be able to tell them how this relates to your library system's mission and goals. But more importantly, how does this help the community? That's what they're looking for when they are going to be backing you. The same thing with goals. You need to be able to tell them what specific thing you want to accomplish. What is your community going to walk away with from this program? And you're also, if you happen to be looking for grants to help support this project, those are things that are going to be very basic that you're going to need to be able to fill in to be able to apply for any kind of grants or program. So here's another example. Reading to therapy dogs. Now this is actually title-wise a really bad example. This shows you how bad I am at coming up with cute titles. I bet if you took this, typed it into an AI program and said, I need a title for a library program about reading to therapy dogs, they'd come up with something way better than my boring title. So if you want to give that a shot, I think you'd probably find much cuter things. But a justification, this program will support literacy in our community by building confidence in emerging readers. And specific goals. You want to create excitement about reading and provide opportunities to practice reading aloud. So It's a lot easier to sell what you're trying to do when you have these things already written down and figured out. And if you're working with a group especially, or if you're getting so bogged down in all the rest of your daily work and trying to make this program happen in addition to it, having those to look back at can sort of give you a boost as, yes, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I am really pushing to make this happen, because this is going to be a good thing. Because sometimes you have to pump yourself up a little bit too with things. Well, that kind of leads us to funding sources. In your planning process, if you write down a list of possible funding sources, of course, there is the library budget. If your library has a programming budget, there's also Friends of the Library groups. But if you take some time to also sort of really think about brainstorm, that's what I'm looking for, really brainstorm different people, different places in the community that might be supportive of the program you're doing. So, for example, pine bark beetles. Well, there's a chance that, you've got a local branch of the State Extension Service there. You might have the forestry or agriculture people who are around. You might have a pest control company or even a tree removal company who might think about sponsoring all of the refreshments for your program, or even coming in as a guest speaker. Those are things that if you stop and you sit and you write things out a bit, it can help you get more ideas of how to keep going and making your program so much better. With timing, there are so many factors to consider. We're just going to brush on a few of them. Think about your target audience's availability. So, for example, if you're doing a program that is geared towards older adults, once you get older and your vision decreases, you're not as comfortable seeing to drive at night. You're not as comfortable driving in general sometimes, but certainly not at night. That's a very common thing. So you might not want to schedule a program for older adults that's going to be happening late at night because there might be some reluctance for some people to even go out at that time of night. Or if you think about like a preschool program, if you do something right after lunch, that's really right around nap time. And if the program's really great and the parent really wants to keep them up after lunch and bring them to your program, you can have some real cranky kids. So you kind of have to think about when is a good time for your participants that you're trying to reach to be able to come to you. And location availability. The reason I put this on, again, it seems like a no-brainer, is how far in advance do you need to request or reserve that location? And also make sure that you are building in enough time before and after the program for setup and takedown and cleanup. One of the hardest things is when you've had an amazing, wonderful, successful program, you're exhausted, you've had way more people there than you thought could ever happen, everyone's happy, and you literally have someone knocking on the door saying, my meeting starts in 10 minutes, you need to get out. That's frustrating and very stressful. So just make sure that you're giving yourself enough time and scheduling yourself enough time to get the location you want and also to have it for long enough that you're not scurrying and running around and stressing at the last minute. Staff and volunteer availability. Well, it's so hard with so few staff at so many libraries to be able to schedule anything when you know you're going to be fully staffed. Not to mention things happen, life happens. So if there's a day of your scheduling that you know you're just always low, like Wednesdays, you never have enough people on Wednesdays. Well, try your best not to schedule for that day. And with your volunteers, if you're going to be relying on teen volunteers, well, probably not the best to schedule something early in the morning in the summer because they're not really known to be early risers. Something else to look at are other events happening in the community. Now, if the fair's in town, we really cannot compete with funnel cakes and Ferris wheels. It's just not going to happen. But on the other side of the coin, if there is an event in your area that you can sort of ride the coattails of and maybe present a program or two that are relevant to a larger event in your community, as long as you're taking care not to schedule your program around some of the bigger events that might be happening. The one example that I can think of real quick is Cruising the Coast, because that occurs over such a broad area and over it's a whole week-long event, and there's so much that can be done with that. It's just a matter of the library needs to make sure that they're not scheduling during the super big auction or any of those giant events that draw all of the crowds. With timing, also, please give yourself enough time for preparation and for marketing. If you're doing a craft program and it's going to take a long time to purchase the items, get them, separate them and put each little kit together or do some of the beginning parts of a craft, that's going to take a lot longer than you probably realize. And you want to make sure you have enough time to do that, even if it's just a matter of printing things out and sorting them and stapling things together. Make sure you're giving yourself plenty of time for that. And marketing. No one's going to come if they don't know it's happening. So if you are planning far enough in advance and you are making a timing schedule for when you are going to release information and follow up and how you're going to do that, you're a lot more likely to get the word out to a lot more people. We'll cover that real briefly in just a little bit. Location is a bigger deal than you think. There are so many factors to consider. One of them is, of course, is it big enough? Do you have enough space for the anticipated attendance? And I know attendance is always kind of a guess. Sometimes it's just impossible to tell if you're going to have 10 people or 100 people. So do you have enough space for everyone to move around freely and to be able to participate fully in the program? Also, do you have anything messy that you're doing, whether it's food or drink or glitter or hand finger paints, anything like that? Does the space that you're using, does it have carpet? Is the furniture cloth or is it vinyl and wood? Can it be wiped down? Is it something that can be cleaned really easily? You really don't want to end up totally ruining a carpet because you had someone who dropped a whole plate of cupcakes and it smushed into it, and then a whole herd of toddlers came running through and stomped those cupcakes into the carpet. Don't laugh, I'm sure this has happened somewhere. And you just can't get that stain out. You just can't get it gone. So that's something to consider as well. But accessibility shouldn't just be for whoever can easily do something. When you think of someone of average abilities, accessibility should be for everyone. So when you're thinking about space, you need to think about, is there enough space for me to have a table that has more space if someone needs it? Is there enough space for people with assistive devices to be able to walk around and to participate and do all of the activities. MLC has a disability support coordinator. Her name is Ruth Jenkiri. She is absolutely amazing. Her contact information is going to be at the end of this presentation. If you ever have questions or want some recommendations, please do contact Ruth. She'll be happy to talk things over with you, make some recommendations, take a look at your space. She's absolutely wonderful, and she knows way more than I do about these things. With your location, you also have to think, do they have enough furniture? Do they have the type of furniture I need for this? Do they have enough tables? Do they have enough chairs? And also, are you going to be the one who has to physically arrange these things or not? If it's large, heavy tables and it's just you really don't want to cause any injuries to yourself. You want to make sure that you're taking a look at what's there and planning in case you need help with moving those big, heavy things. Another thing that people don't often take into consideration is how hard it is to do a program offsite physically. So you have the time factor, you have to have time for loading, for gathering all of your things, packing them, loading them into your vehicle, driving there, pulling all of things out, and then doing a setup. Sometimes you have to do a table yourself or a tent, something like that. All of that is very physically draining and takes a lot of time. So if that's something that you're doing, make sure you're giving yourself enough people to handle it without too much physical strain, and also building in enough time so that you can do it calmly and cool and not rushing around like crazy trying to make this setup happen in the middle of a field somewhere or wherever. The same thing about takedown. Everything you set up, you have to take down, and that can get real tiresome. If you've been at an event for 4, 6, 8 hours, you are just going to be tuckered out. And you have to keep that in mind, that you're going to still have to get that boost of energy to get everything gathered back up together and back to the vehicle and get all of it back to the place it's supposed to go before you're done for the day. Now, materials and supplies, sure, it makes sense to just, make a list. What do we need? But I recommend making 3 lists. The first would be necessities. Everything, even the teeny tiny smallest items that you're going to need to make that program happen. What is absolutely necessary? And that's everything from tablecloths or projector screen, all the way down to Scotch tape or paper clips, everything that is absolutely necessary. And then a separate list for luxuries, things that you don't have or that aren't really necessary, but would really make the program run smoother or better, or really kind of class it up a little bit. So for example, if you're doing a craft program and you have all of your, there's all of the craft items that you're going to need to make it, that's a necessity. What would be really nice is to have small plastic trays where you can pre-sort all of these supplies into individual trays for each person. That would make things run faster and smoother, and it would also keep all of those little items contained in a small area so that patrons aren't, losing all of their googly eyes or something. But major purchases, your third list should be larger items that could be used for multiple types of programs. So think of things like a set of 25 easels for an art program, things that are going to cost a little bit more money and maybe aren't necessary, but can be used in the long term and are going to be more big ticket items. And the reason for this, we'll go over in 1 second. The reason for this is so that if you come across unexpected funding sources or someone makes an offer to you of money or supplies, you want to be able to say, yes, I need it, and this is what I need it for, and this is how much it's going to cost. Because it's so much easier for someone to say yes to a request if you say, I want not just, well, we could maybe use some easels for the program. It's a lot easier for them to say yes if you say, we need 25 easels. They're this brand. They cost $19.95 a piece. This is where we would purchase them from. Is this something you can support? And hey, we can put a sticker on it that says, you helped fund it. That's going to be a lot more likely to get a response from a potential funder than just, well, we could use some easels. Or even if you tell them we could use 20 easels, they might be able to just go out and get them for you rather than giving you the funds for them. Or they, depending on what kind of a business it is, they might already have the items that you're looking for. So when you're making a list of materials and supplies needed, start with your 3 lists and take a look with all 3 of them and see, what do you have on hand? And not just what do you have enough of on hand? And then take some time to look at what the current costs of the items that you need to purchase are. You can do this just by Googling things online, checking on Amazon or any of the vendor websites that your library uses. And keep in mind, if you might have to pay shipping, that's going to be added to the costs. If you're going to have to pick something up in person, we all love the Dollar Tree, or love to hate the Dollar Tree one. How much staff time is that going to take? And is the library system going to have to pay mileage for the staff to drive there to get the items? And what's that purchasing process that's allowed by your library system? This is where I want to say, I see you, I know what you're doing. So many of us go out and spend our own money on program supplies, especially children's youth services people, because it's easier, or because you forgot something, or because it's last minute and you're just like, oh, just one more bag of those cotton spider webs would really make this whole program pop and just be beautiful, perfect. So easy to fall into that trap. And I want to discourage you from doing that for 2 reasons. First of all, it's going to give you burnout, and you're not going to feel as good about it 6 months down the road, 1 year down the road, when you are still shelling out your own money to pay for supplies. It's going to start wearing on you, and it's going to start wearing on your morale. Second of all, you are not providing your library system or the administration or the purse string people with the true cost of doing a good program. So if you go out and you spend $20 worth of your own money on supplies, and then your program is beautiful, that $20 made all the extra, all the extra pretties happen. Your library system still is thinking that program happened at $80 worth of cost because that's what they spent. They're not factoring in that to make that program happen again, they need $100 because you haven't reported those funds to them. They don't know how much you've spent. They're not getting a good, clear picture. And so you're setting yourself and other staff up for unrealistic expectations if you do that. When you're making your lists, make sure you overestimate just a little bit for the costs needed for materials and supplies. Because sometimes just because it's on Amazon for $12.99 doesn't mean you're going to be able to get it in time, or maybe your library system doesn't order from Amazon, or maybe when you actually go to order it, they're out and you have to buy the $14.99 ones instead. So make sure you throw in a little bit of extra in your budgeting when you're asking for funds to make sure you're not short selling yourself on that. And please don't rely on potential donations of supplies until they're in hand. I'm not saying to be mistrustful. I'm just saying life happens, things happen. Sometimes things don't get to you in the time that they need. So if someone is going to be donating items or supplies to you, wonderful, fabulous. If at all possible, see if you can request that they get them to you well in advance of the program so that you know you've got them, they're on hand, you don't have to worry about it anymore. Now, if you're having a presenter, that adds a whole nother level into your planning. Many presenters are going to either want a contract or some sort of stated agreement about what's going to happen and how and when. So I'm going to give a 1-hour presentation on pine bark beetles on Thursday, October 22nd. And that's it, you're done. And some may want a more complicated actual legal contract in there as well. Many presenters are free, and I know we do tend to try to go for those, but some require an honorarium or a speaker fee. Make sure when you are contacting someone that you want to be at your location that you are very upfront with them, that you say, "Hi, I'd love to have you present for this program. Do you charge a fee? Do you charge an honorarium?" Make sure that you're just very clear and direct when you start that process out so that you don't get a little further down into the negotiations and then you find out their speaker fee is like $1,000 and you're like, whoa, I only have $200 for the whole program. Also keep in mind that if you're bringing a speaker in, there's going to be, from who's traveling, there might be travel arrangements, and that's pretty darn costly. Transportation and lodging and meals, and something that kind of tends to slip under the radar sometimes with a presenter is there are lots of small fees when you're bringing them in. Things like baggage, if they're bringing extra baggage with them, airport parking, taxis or Ubers, small things like that that you need to make sure you're putting an allowance in there for in your budgeting. Now, if you have someone who's coming to you for free and they're coming from they're not local, they're coming from a little bit of a distance and they're not charging you for anything, they're not staying the night, they're not charging you for meals, they're not, they're like, nope, I'll just show up and do it. It's good form if you are able to ask, like I said, if you're able, can I maybe reimburse you for some of your gas money? Or can I take you out to lunch and I'm not saying do this as an individual, I mean as a professional in regards to the library system doing this. If you're able, think about doing something like that or providing them with just some small little gift or token of appreciation because they're giving you their time, their knowledge, their experience. and sharing that with your community. And if there's anything small you can do that can just make it a little bit easier for them, that really goes a long way. All right, staff time. Time is money. It really and truly is. And we have so very little of either, honestly. Please take some time to think about how much time you think is going to be needed for this program. And that doesn't just mean, the 1 hour that the program is running. Think about how much time do you think you're going to need to plan this process, especially if you're planning something as a group or bringing in community members. How many meetings are there going to be? How much brain power? How much thinking time at your desk do you think you're going to need to do this? How much time is it going to take to either drive to the store, find your items and purchase them, or make those requests through your library system's purchasing person? How much time is it going to take for you to create the marketing materials and disseminate them? How much, of course, not just for the program, but for setting it up, taking it down, and something no one really likes to think about, cleaning it up as well. And are you going to evaluate or document what your program was and how well it went? I really, really encourage you to do this. If you have a very simple evaluation for your participants or for your attendees, you can gain a lot of information about what worked and what didn't. And if you document all of the things that did or didn't go right or wrong, then the next time you do a similar program, or the next time someone at a neighboring library in your system, another branch does one, you've already got that written down to look back at and say, oh yeah, no, remember, don't put those tables in the U shape. That was a disaster. We need to put them in an L shape. Something like that. Little things like that make a big difference. Now, marketing. We have here at MLC a public relations coordinator. Her name is Christina Kelly, and this is her wheelhouse. This is her thing. She is happy to help libraries with designing and creating all of their marketing materials, work with you on marketing plans. Her information is at the end of this presentation on the slides as well. She's fabulous and wonderful, and I do encourage you to reach out to her if this is something that you're not comfortable with or you think maybe you could use a few pointers on. Because the more you promote, the more likely you are to have a good attendance. A lot of time goes into designing a really good flyer or poster or social media post. You can't simply just throw things together and it all magically works. Now, Canva is the tool that a lot of libraries are using currently, and it does make it so much easier. We also have some tutorials on this YouTube channel about basics of using Canva. But even if you're a seasoned Canva user, it takes time to come up with something that's attractive and catchy and really gets your message across in a quick burst. It also takes a lot of time to do the printing and the distributing of any sort of printed materials that you're going to do. And with social media, it's amazing how long it takes to upload a file and share it and send it, and then see if you can find other people on social media who you can say, hey, can you share this? Local media as well. With local media and city and county avenues of marketing, they're going to be planning a lot of their things pretty far in advance. So if you are starting your planning process 2 or 3 months out, if you make sure you build in enough time for that marketing material before the month that your program is occurring, you're more likely to be able to get that information out through those avenues. So for example, if your city has a newsletter or an email blast that they send out, or they put things up on their website, if you have your materials done well in hand, you're more likely to get those things sent out through those avenues than if you wait till the last minute. And it's also good if you're going to be contacting radio or TV. It's also good to keep in mind sometimes they like to, at the last minute, if they're in their neighborhood, pop in and say, "Oh, didn't you have a thing? You say you've got a thing tomorrow, or you say you've got a thing next week." So it's always good to be kind of prepared with a little script in your head of something to promote your program just in case something like that happens. Now, every good program planning form should have 1 or 2 timelines on it. And this is useful whether it's one person working in a program, whether it's 5 or 20. It's good to go ahead and from the start schedule out when you're going to do what. You have to hold yourself to task on getting things accomplished in enough time to make everything work successfully. So that includes when you're going to schedule the location. And this may seem a little strange seeing it on the screen, staff scheduling. Well, if you are able to tell the person who's doing the scheduling early enough, give them enough advanced warning that you need this person and this person on that day to work your program, they're more likely to be able to make it happen. So if you forget about it and you're waiting until, oh, I really need Jack and Jill next week. They've got to help me do the program. They've been with me through this whole process. There may be no option staffing wise for them to be able to help you. But if you give the people making the schedules enough advance notice, you're more likely to be able to get the number of people you need for that program. And purchasing is on here twice because there are 2 different kinds of items with 2 different kinds of timelines. So your non-perishable items, things like craft supplies or crackers or tablecloths, paper goods, those can be bought anytime during the process. And the sooner that you purchase them, the sooner you can check that off of your list. But the perishable items, those are the things that have to be bought right close to the program. Flowers, fresh flowers if you're doing that, bags of ice, any kind of perishable food item if you're gonna have to order and pick up a whole bunch of cupcakes from Sam's or something. Those are things that if you have it written down when you're going to do it and who's going to do it, then you're a lot less likely to end up the morning of the program starting to put things together, starting to get it ready and realize we don't have any ice. We've got to have ice. Oh my gosh, all the drinks are hot. We have the coolers. We don't have the ice. Who's going to get the ice? And if you can keep those incidents down by just simply making a timeline in the beginning, that's going to make that program so much smoother. Also, make sure that you're including in a timeline time for prepping your materials, whether it's printing things out and stapling them or gathering supplies up for a craft or whatever. If you have to prepare materials beforehand, you want to make sure you are scheduling time for you to get that done. So that again, it's not the morning of the program and you're still counting out, 2 googly eyes to put into each paper plate. Make sure that you create a marketing timeline because, again, if you don't do things until very close to the program, if you're not promoting soon enough, the word's just not going to get out there and people aren't going to know about it, or they might see it well after the event. And that kind of hurts when someone's like, oh, I would have loved to gone to it. I didn't even see it until like yesterday and it was already over. And then you're like, I missed, reaching a potential person. And also setup. It's also good to have a completely separate list added on about just the setup. When are you going to do things? If you have access to the room the day before, are you going to set up the tables and chairs before, or do you have to do it right before the program? What things can be done beforehand to make the actual program itself go smoothly? And the last big thing I want to talk about is anticipating stress, because programs, no matter how well planned out they are, something can go wrong and probably will. Whether it's someone dropping a whole tray of cupcakes or a presenter who gets a flat tire on the way into the program and they're like, I can be there, but I'm going to be 30 minutes late. All sorts of things can go wrong. If you mentally prepare yourself beforehand, that everything is not going to go perfectly, everything's not going to go smoothly, then it's going to make it a little bit easier to handle when things don't go smoothly. If you prepare yourself ahead of time, it just makes it a little bit easier. If at all possible, do try to have a backup person or a backup plan. If you are the main person handling this program, just think, if you win the lottery the week before, wouldn't you feel bad if your program just doesn't happen or falls apart or gets canceled because you won the lottery and you've gone off to the Caribbean somewhere? And also, if you have a presenter, think about, yeah, what if they do get a flat tire on the way in and they're going to be late, or something happens and they have to cancel and they can't make it? Even if you're not able to provide the people who show up with a full program, you're able to give them something, some sort of activity, something so that they just don't show up and you say, oh, I'm sorry, the presenter was on his way, his car died, we're just going to have to cancel. They're going to walk away with a pretty icky feeling. Even if they understand, they're going to walk away with an icky feeling about that. But if you can show them that you are working to provide something for them, whether it's an activity or a discussion, whatever, then they're going to feel a little bit better about the time they spent getting ready and traveling to the library and actually showing up for a program. So if possible, see if when you're in that planning process, see if you can come up with an idea or two of just in case, what if. And please, 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 it's a very hard thing to do for a lot of people. Share that workload. Before you know it, something that's a small program can turn into something so much bigger. And with the planning form, at least you have already thought through and you're working through to get a good picture of what actions are going to be needed, what kind of work really is going to be going into this. But don't feel bad about asking for help. And don't feel bad about letting others step in and help take some of that workload off of you if it's going to make that program happen. There are a few online resources that are recommended. American Library Association has a website. It's a programming librarian, and it is wonderful. They have lots of ideas for programming, lots of articles that they post on there. YALSA, that's the Youth Services branch of ALA. They have a set of programming guidelines for youth services. And also the Public Library Association has programming guides as well. And those are perhaps not the most detailed, but they do give you a good basis in thinking about how you should be planning things. There are also quite a number of active Facebook library programming groups, and there are a lot of other people out there who are doing the work that you're doing, and they've got a lot of knowledge and a lot of ideas to share, and they can also be super supportive. And sometimes, especially if you're in a small library system or you're the only librarian in your branch, sometimes you can start feeling pretty isolated. Some of these groups are just wonderful for asking questions, asking for suggestions, getting people's thoughts on a program idea that you've got, seeing if someone else has done something similar. If they have any ways to make it easier or better for you. So I do recommend taking a look at some of these and seeing if they're your people or not. Here are the contacts here for the Library Commission that I talked about. There's my contact information, and as there's Christina Kelly, our public relations person. Again, please, that is what she does. Reach out to her if you need any help, you want any kind of pointers, you need some design assistance, reach out to her and let her know. She's really great about it. And then down at the bottom is Ruth Jinkiri, our disability support coordinator. Absolutely amazing person, and her knowledge is absolutely incredible. And she can really do a lot to help you with recommendations of making sure that all of your programs are accessible to people of all abilities. So thank you so much for listening today. You're always welcome to contact us here at the Library Commission if you have questions about anything that we've covered. Bye-bye. Maybe. There we go. Now I found it. Bye.